Hey, everybody, this is Paul Hunton here, General Manager of Texas Tech Public Media. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the Allen family residency visit. Tonight, we'll be talking art and family. Please keep in mind that this webinar is being recorded, and you may ask any questions you want. Just hit the Q&A button down on your Zoom window there and write in your questions, and the Allen family will be around to answer those after the conversation. So sit back and enjoy a conversation with the Allen family discussing art and family. All right. Hey, Allen family. Thank you for joining me on this Zoom call and for this digital residency. I think this is going to be great for our students here at Texas Tech. And I really appreciate y'all taking the time to talk to me today. So thank you.
Thank you.
I want to start, Terry and Joe Harvey, I've talked to y'all a lot about this, but about that, when the boys were little, a lot of times in families, there's sometimes that separation of dad's work and mom's work and then family life. And that's not really the way it was for y'all. Joe Harvey, let's start with you. Can you kind of describe how the boys from an early period were sort of incorporated just in the larger creative life of y'all's work?
Well, I don't think there was ever a couple that I know of. I could be wrong, but I'm sure everybody's thrilled to have kids. But Terry and I married when we were really young. We were still teenagers. And we wanted a baby immediately. And it took us 5 years to get Bukka. And then 4 months later, I was pregnant with Bale. Well, I was screaming my head off with joy. And Terry was so happy. It was the most creative thing, having Bukka and Bale, that I ever did. It was the ultimate of my wishes. And boy, it was just great. And the whole time Terry was saying, when we have kids, we're going to have so much fun. And so it was never like, it was more fun we were going to have when we had kids. It was never, we took them everywhere. And we ended up just robbing them blind for all their creative ideas. And that was really great for our work. So from the very beginning, I mean, we played with the kids. And play is part of what we do. It's a big part of what we do when we're working, just trying to be open.
I know that Bale told me a story, and I actually want to play y'all a clip real quick if I can. So I'm going to switch here and share my screen and play you a little video here.
I went to my dad's studio on the floor, and he gave me a piece of paper, like just a massive piece of paper, and wanted me to do kind of recreate these drawings or trying to capture something bigger that he could incorporate or integrate into one of his pieces or something. And I realized how challenging it was. And I realized, like, I had this separated respect and admiration for my dad as an art and what he did, more. And then I think as I grew older, it became more like, I guess creatively, we became more contemporaries in the mindset that, that I understood, that I was more comfortable and confident with my own voice. But before I really had a voice, I leaned heavily and kind of in awe of my mom and dad, and what they did creatively. And I thought it was great that was my individual experience, but it's always a little more relaxing in a theater context or when you're all collectively trying to do something. And I still think my dad usually carried the weight when we were younger by keeping, like, he would have the script and insert the squares for us to fill in. So he was like the director.
But they were also stealing stuff from us all the time.
Yeah, it works both ways. It works both ways.
And I think they'd be the first to admit that.
All right. So, and Joe Harvey, you alluded to that, but Terry, is that true? How did you incorporate the boys into your work, and can you describe that memory for us?
Well, we were even though it was 5 years before Harvey got pregnant, it was the end of the 60s, and we were in LA, and we were struggling financially. We didn't have any money, but the kids, from the time they came along, were like it was a comfort to have them. And it was never, you worried about, health care and all of that, and then poisoning themselves with, dog pills, which they pretty much did. But I don't think I ever thought about when I was working. I never thought about it as far as how it might be affecting them. I just took it for granted. This is what I do, and you're kids, and you do what you do. And we had a lot of friends that were artists and musicians that the kids were around. And I just think, in retrospect, they just absorbed what they kind of needed for their own ideas and their own, dreams about what they were going to do. But as far as ripping them off, which, we did, absolutely. I mean, I remember coming home and Bale had done a piece. He had 2 crosses in the yard, in the front yard, one all the way across the yard. And then there was like a wire that ran between. And then in the middle, he had put a mirror. So it was like these 2 crosses with this line with a mirror in the middle of it. And I said, what is that? And he said, it's a vampire trap. And that's really good. I never used it, but I sure thought
I still need to do that one.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, from the time Bucko could walk, he would go to the piano, and we had a game called Rhyming Words, which, he would sit on the piano bench and we'd just play this little song and come up with rhymes, come up with words. But it's like, really, both of them were so kind of on attack mode at what they were wanting to do. Like, Bale's turned his room into like this Mersbow, this Kurt Schwitter's incredible environment. And kids would come over, I think, just to look at it, and Bale wouldn't even sleep in it because he didn't want to mess up the bed, but he also didn't want to make up the bed, so he had to sleep on the floor, And but then Bukka started, was in a series of kind of kid bands. This was after we were in Fresno, so they were older, but not a lot older. But that kind of started doing, stuff just like we were doing. And Joe Harvey would listen to them talking and sitting out on the porch or doing whatever they were doing and sneak up on them and tape them. And actually ended up using a second piece she ever did called Duck Blind. She used all of these tapes of them playing, just talking on the porch with all of their friends and whatever. But also she interspersed it with drawings that both of them had done, which were just these fantastic drawings. So it wasn't like they were ripped off as much as that they were incorporated.
Yeah. Absolutely. Which is such a gift, I imagine, right, Bukka? Looking back, obviously now as an adult and a father, I mean, I imagine that was something you really appreciate now as an adult and a musician and an artist yourself.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it, because I approach raising my son the same way. I mean, that's what that's the only way I really know how to do it, and it seems to be working okay. So I have to say that's a kind of a reflection of how I grew up as well, because I really try to incorporate him into as much as I'm doing. I want him to see and experience a lot of different things, and he's around a lot of people too. That's another thing. It's just like you're exposed to all the, like Bale and I were both exposed to just a wonderful group of people that were, most of which were just creative people. And I didn't know how to delegate that when I was a kid in any way, but it was like it's an energy we were around all the time. And as I've gotten older now, I can identify what that is. It's like I realize it's really unique and kind of invaluable in terms of the way I think about people being exposed to things, and I'm not one to be really afraid of exposing crew to things. I don't want him. I mean, you can pretty much tell when a kid is having a hard time with something that they're, dealing with. But it's not really about that. I think the idea of exposing kids to what's happening in real life at all times is really, really important. I mean, I of course shelter them from things that are really awful, but that's how we grew up. We were always exposed to things. We always were able to see movies and listen to music and look at drawings and not be afraid of certain things that a lot of people have a tendency to want to kind of put in a box, I guess. But yeah. So that it just kind of it carries on in a way that I can't really even explain. It's just kind of naturally who I've become. But when I think about crew, a lot of times I think about how I was raised, and I want him to experience that. So it kind of just carries on,
And Bale, y'all had mentioned to me that also that like that energy was attractive to your friends too, that they didn't have that as much in their home, that creativity, that energy, that acceptance. And so y'all's house was kind of the place to be for y'all's friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our environment in itself, our home, was so rich and just so inspiring and so creative, that kind of turned Bukka and I into who we are just as people and creatively as well. Had such a strong influence on a daily basis. It wasn't just the art or the things for the sake of art, but it was the way we lived, and like even the way we played and everything. I always felt like it was different, and I think it was directly kind of a result, of growing up in such a fantastic environment. And like it had, kids that came over couldn't help, but anyone who came over was inspired or affected in some way by it because it was so unique. Especially for, like being in Fresno, like I think we talked about this a while back, but it was so different. Our house felt different from the other houses I go and spend the night at. It was just, I knew it was different early on, but it was also in a way so connected and so close. We were such a strong, tight family. And I think that transparency was part of the great communication that we had. For better or worse, we heard good or bad. And so my mom and dad not only were focused on their careers, but they were totally locked in on us having a great family life, and home life. And it was fun. I mean, we laughed, we belly laughed. We wrestled all the time. One of the cool things we did, my dad did every Sunday, instead of going to church, he opened the door. And first of all, he'd wake us up by throwing records at us. Like he'd go to Tower Records or we'd all do it together. And we'd wake up and be like, whoa, dude, whoa, Joan Jett and the Blackguards, right on it. And then we'd go in the living room and spin records and crank it and listen. I don't know how many speakers my dad blew or we blew of his. But half the neighborhood could hear us rocking out every Sunday. And that's like, and it was fun,
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes you'd bring a girl home and your mom would bark at her.
Yeah, that was Bukka's
Mom, she still does that.
Yeah, that hasn't changed.
That has not changed.
Maybe we should add some context to that. Joe Harvey, you want to tell us that story?
Yes, I will. Bukka brought a girl home, and I think he was in junior high. And I'd done my first movie, which was David Byrne's movie, True Story. And I said, okay, I'm going to turn down. I'm not going to do anything unless it's really good. And I'll be very selective in anything I do from now because I've been in a movie. I get a call. Joe Harvey, this is a very small part. You play a dog. Okay. So I'm rehearsing, and I put my hair in dog ears, And I'm down in the kitchen, behind the bar in the kitchen, and playing like I'm a dog. And Bukka brings home one of the first girls he ever brought home, and trying to impress her. And he comes in, and I hike my legs and start growling at her and barking. And Bukka was so upset. And when he came back in the door after they left, he looked at me just really mean and said, "Mom," he said, "that girl has even been to Europe."
You know, it's funny.
Horrified. She never came back.
Well, no, listen to this.
Yeah.
About 6 months ago, through Facebook and social media, I reconnected with her.
Really?
And yeah, she lives on the East Coast and she's happily married and everything. But she wrote and just said hello.
He only barks.
At the end of our texting, she went, "Bark, bark."
Oh. I love that. What a great story. That's so good. And I think I think that really speaks to the energy and the creativity and the fun that y'all had as a family growing up. Bukka, another question for you. You had mentioned that, that the experience of watching your dad record Lubbock on Everything, even though you were very young, but you were there. And that was the first time you sort of saw how a record was made, which was maybe in the moment not as enlightening or as formidable, but as you've gotten older and been a musician for many, many years and had a successful professional career, that was very formidable for you. Can you kind of describe that memory of what that was like and sort of what that has meant to you in your career?
Well, I mean, it's like I look back at the relationships that were developed. I mean, I was a kid, so I didn't really understand the process, but I was around the energy of it being made. And at the end of that, it's sort of like, it was magical to me. It was the idea of like seeing someone make something and a bunch of musicians working and then somehow it being translated onto a piece of tape after it had been sliced up in a million pieces, and then hearing this outcome of basically these incredible songs that were coming out. I didn't know technically what was going on. I just thought it was very magical how a group of people could make sound and then replay it later. But it's not even ironic. It's just the truth. It's like being in that kind of environment. And then over time, I mean, obviously was attracted to it and liked it. And as I got older and became more interested in recording and playing and learning how to do all that kind of stuff, you can't help but to realize that, your environment kind of makes up a huge component of what you can kind of lean on. And through Lubbock on Everything, it's like, I still do sessions with Lloyd all the time, and I do work with Richard all the time. And it's like those relationships they've been with me my entire life, and that's another thing we were talking about. It's like those kind of experiences, when they're good, it's amazing how they kind of stick to you, and then how all the relationships maintain. Because I can't tell you how much music has come from, kind of in a weird way, from that. It's like I grew up knowing Lloyd. I told you that Lloyd had helped me do some recordings that basically got me into school, basically paid for my school because of those recordings. And then I still do a lot of sessions with him, but it's a really interesting thing, a generational thing too. It's like what's happening now is I'm seeing like all these relationships that I kind of learned through my folks. Then I developed my own underneath the same kind of umbrella, and now they're all merging. And a good example of that is my dad's band right now. I mean, it's like Charlie and Shannon are more from my generation in a sense, and we've all just kind of eventually started collaborating, and that's what's amazing to me. It's just how over time we've all been able to share one another actually in a huge way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing I wanted to say about what Bukka was talking about, that kind of magical thing that was happening with Lubbock, this exact same thing was happening to me, because it was the first time I had been around those guys, the first time that I had worked with them, and it was so suddenly easy, that I was elated the whole time. I think everybody was just kind of elated because it was of the way it was just kind of coming together, And I know Buck and Bale would come in sometimes after after we'd finished recording or something, and Bale would play drums and Buck would play on this piano that we had piles of foam on top of, which we call the only mountain in Lubbock, to kind of baffle the sound that we had. The studio looked like it looked like a junkyard.
Jag carpet.
But another thing I really, really remember that I've just thought about recently about that is I remember you, Dad, listening to mixes in Nanny's back room. I remember you sitting there with a little recording, with a cassette tape and a little tiny tape recorder, listening to mixes.
Yeah.
And I remember how just the idea of that sound moving from where it was tracked into a little tape recorder in the floor, and you listening to mixes. I really remember.
Yeah, that's the Sony Walkmans just came out.
I just heard a really good friend of mine just passed away, who was a great drummer, a guy named Jamie Oldacre, and there were some great interviews of him where he was talking about, he was in a recording studio where he had done all that early Clapton stuff, and he was talking about when he was a kid, how he's like, look, man, you're dealing with magic. You're in the sense that some musician is playing something that's an expression of who they are, an expression of their spirit and everything they are as a person, and it's going from their fingertips through all these wires, and it's imprinted on something to stay and remain for as long as you can maintain, some sort of duplicate copy of whatever you're dealing with. But he's like, there's nothing else but that. It's like capturing someone's spirit. And I saw this interview with him, and I remember thinking that when I was listening to those mixes, it was specifically when you were listening to mixes of Lubbock on Everything, Dad, where it was like magic to me. It was just beyond. And I thought it was remarkable,
I wanted to say something. There's a part, like Terry brought the whole family in to sing on one of the songs on that. And we've just been going to Marfa to write songs, and Buck and Bale and a lot of those same people you're talking about from way back then were all together, working together on music and then playing together in the shows. And it's just an amazing thing, because really, when I made a list, I just started a few minutes before this, and all the things that we have done together. I mean, almost every piece I've ever done, with the exception of, I think, 2, have had song lyrics that y'all have both written in it, had your drawings, had something, and then was about things about you. And when we were living in Fresno, every afternoon, Terry would work in the mornings, and then we would all go to this cheap man's country club where the river ran through, and have a picnic and stay all day, every day in the summer. And then those days were so productive for all of us and so much fun. And on Friday nights, we always went to the show. And then when we came back from the movies, Terry would play music that related, he thought, to the movie, and y'all would draw the movies, and we would talk. And if there was violence or sex or whatever in the movies, we would talk about it. And it was a great way to be open and creative all at the same time, and also have that time together. I thought that was so fun.
Well, and it's also, we had a love for kind of all art forms, and us as kids, we love talking about movies and going to the movies and listening to music and recording music and playing in bands and drawing pictures and making art. It's kind of like, it was kind of just, there were no boundaries in terms of where we delved into. It seems like it just kind of became our existence as kids. I know Buck and I, it's kind of, we just thought that way, where everything we approached was kind of creative. Even the way, like, we played with our toys, when we were kids.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to ask you, Belle, actually, and you can follow up here, is what was, I'm a twin. And so me and my brother, we were just, simpatico and everything and did everything together. What was that, relationship with Bukka like creatively? Y'all ended up at the same college and obviously we're very close. What was y'all's collaborative spirit like? Maybe not as little kids, but even as you got older and were in those years in college, what was that sort of like? What was that relationship like?
I think the most important thing that through that wasn't as much our collaborative, what we did together, but how we supported each other. And I think we both really looked up to each other and what we were doing. It's funny. It's like when we were in college, we were roommates, and he went to music school at Berkeley. I went to art school at the museum school. And I spent more time at Berkeley, arguably, than I did at my school, because most of my friends were musicians. And I was just like, I'm not a musician, I'm a drummer, but I'm in art school. But I mean, we had this, just kind of, that I had a respect for his world and kind of a fascination for it and an interest in it. And then I think I know Bukka does too. Bukka's always drawn pictures and worked with oil pastels or done little sculptures and pieces. And I'm sure has always had a fascination with the visual art world as well. And I think our worlds are very separate. And when we collaborate, it's usually when we play with my dad, or as a family, when we've done these performance things. And I don't think Buck and I have yet to really full on, just the two of us, do something totally together that I could think of. But we've always been there supporting each other, which is pretty important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's that idea of sharpening each other. I'm sure as a family, y'all have all inspired each other in one way or another. I want to touch on do you know what your children are tonight, which was sort of the first sort of like outward family, not commercial, but the first sort of collaborative work that was done as a group that audiences came to. What was the impetus of that? How did that start?
There was a space in Washington, D.C. called the WPA, which was the Washington Projects for the Arts. And a friend of ours, Jock Reynolds, who actually kind of was the director of the space Joe Harvey did her very first performance in San Francisco. But Jock, we'd known kind of since we, early on when we went to Fresno and spent time in the Bay Area. But he decided to do this show called The American Family, where he was going to invite artists, musicians, all these different people to do performances and do paintings, do whatever, but everything inspired by the American family. And so he decided that he wanted us to write a piece as a family about a family. And so that's where it came from. And we all sat down very early on and said, okay, everybody write your own stuff. We'll try to be as democratic, big mistake, as we could do. And then we kind of put all this together where we didn't have it. We just had a lot of stuff, and we went to Washington and kind of started building it while we were there. We had a theater space, and we'd work on it during the day, go back to the space we were staying in at night, and rewrite. And I had to retype because I was the only person that could type, So
He's still upset over that. He kept saying, "You're all trying to kill me. You're all trying to kill me because we changed everything every minute."
There was also you guys remember there was some sort, I think it was a commercial on television at the time that was like, do you know where your children are?
Yeah. It's the
It was
public
like
service.
public service.
That's what we got the title.
Yeah.
But we said what? Was that,
Yeah,
was it-
and that's we kind of put the spin on that. You know, what they
You
are.
know what your children are.
And the characters' names were Mom, Dad, Boy 1, and Boy 2.
It's pretty generic. But the subjects we dealt with, it was kind of no holds barred. You know, we dealt with drugs, we dealt with alcohol, we dealt with you know, happy family, sad family, you know, pissed off family, every kind of, and then inserts of little different characters and whatever. Bukka played some of his first songs at some of those songs he ended up recording and going to getting a scholarship and going to Berkeley, recorded with Lloyd, like the stuff he was talking about earlier. But
Bale did his poems.
Bale did
Scabs.
this stab
And I played drums for the first time ever.
and played the
Played
drums.
drums.
Yeah.
And did scabs. Yeah.
So anyway, it was a real kind of review, you know, a very insane review, but it was a review, you know. But there was some great joy underneath it all, you know. There was just like, it was propelled by this kind of joy of having fun, and even at the roughest parts, it was still, you know, that was there. And I think people responded to that, you know, like probably, I mean, the kids were the first time, what, you were like 11 or 12 and 13, something like that?
No, we were older than that, Dad. I think
Early
it was
high school.
Yeah.
Early high school. I thought that was later when we performed it in San Francisco. Anyway, they were kind of the perfect teen, you know, that cusp of being a teenager and a kid. You know, so there was that tension that was going on. And they performed the whole thing in their underwear, you know, shades and wearing
Headphones.
you know, Boy 1 and Boy 2 in their underwear. You know?
That's no different than Crew this morning in front of his virtual learning.
His school. Yeah. That's like everyone right now. That's like all of us now.
Like everybody right now.
The whole thing about COVID is that, you know, nobody's going to wear pants or brasiers again.
Yeah, exactly. No need.
But you know, everyone was stunned by we got just this great review that we loved because it just said we were so nuts. But people really responded. We could have toured, if the kids would have just stayed the same age, we could have toured that play forever.
Yeah.
But, you know, people were shocked, I think, that Buck and Belle were such polite, sweet people. And we dealt with everything. We talked about everything. There was kind of no limitations on language or anything. We were very open. And I think some people were shocked that we could all write a play like that and be that open about different subjects.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think you guys talked about this a little earlier, but just the way you would dissect movies and talk about their themes and ideas in ways that were, you know, they might have been a mature movie, but you dissected them and talked fully about them as a family in ways that I'm sure for the boys really helped them understand and have, you know, strong ideas about what those things were, because instead of subjects being taboo, they were thoroughly thought through and talked about.
Yeah. But you know,
it also paid off, that honesty, because it's like the irony, like people have a tendency to not want to talk about things thinking they can protect people from whatever it is. The reality is that because of it, that when we were really in a real bind at any time, we actually leaned on each other. We weren't afraid to, and most of my friends were terrified of their folks in terms of, you know, if they got in any kind of trouble or bind, that their folks were the last people that they would talk to. And through being open and talking about things, actually, y'all were the people we went to get out of a bind. So so that's really important, to be able to have that kind of stability in your life, you know, even if you don't know what it is at the time when it's happening. You know?
Like if you were to get into a scuffle with the high school quarterback in Lubbock.
Yeah. Or sitting in jail in a coonskin cap after being drunk and getting pulled over by the cops. Yeah.
Well, there's some inside story there that we won't go deep into, but Terry and Joe Harvey, and Terry, let's start with you. What has it been like to watch your boys grow up into artists, into their own selves, and then also get to collaborate with them as adults, as fully grown artists doing their own thing? What has that meant for you, and what's that like for you to get to work with them?
Well, you know, in a way, it's everything. It's like, you know, I know that, you know, we never push them in any manner to be an artist or be a musician or any of the arts. But there was no surprise that they became involved in that, because that's what they were around, you know. But I know, like Bale, the way his sense of making work and whatever is totally his, you know. Bukka's sense of playing music is totally his, and it's like, you know, there was a place where it kind of tilted, where that all of a sudden, you know, I felt like I was learning as much about making music and making art by watching them, as they say that they came learning from what I was doing. But I don't think you ever think that way in terms of this is what's happening, you know. I think it's something that you become aware of after a while, you know, and there's a really wonderful feeling, I think. I know, you know, that there's a comfort to it, I think, that I don't know any other way other than Joe Harvey working with her, even though the working together, building things can be total hell. You know, it can be hell, putting something together, especially if you're slamming heads, disagreeing about the way something should be. But when you get through that and you realize the trust that's involved, how crucial that is to your well-being, you know, inside yourself, that trust in your family, you know.
Yeah. Joe Harvey, you want to add to that?
Well, you know, it's such, it's really special, I think, and it's helped us as a family, I think, that there has never been competition. It's always been about really celebrating whatever the other one is doing. And if we can be a part of it, great. But it's like celebrating that instead of, you know, like Terry go out and do all of his things. And sometimes he would be like riding high and getting a lot of attention, and I would be struggling. And then it would just like a seesaw go up. And I'm sure that's the same with the kids. But all through that, it's never been anything but like that, you know, the other person as your back and is wanting you to do good. And Terry's my very best editor. And I know when I show him something and he knows the same thing, that we're going to say the exact truth, what we feel. And you might get mad and you might go away for 2 days and not want to change it, but you know good and well it's about the work. It's not something personal. And I think that's really important. And that's what the kids were talking about. It's that trust that, you really are so proud of each other in any achievements, and really hang together when things aren't going well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a seesaw, because you always know, especially if you're an artist, a musician, whatever, that you're going to be up part of the time, and then it's like a seesaw. It's not anything that's going to stay static.
Yeah.
If I could add to that a little, Paul, it's like
let's flip that and say, Bale, what is that like for you to work with your parents as an artist yourself now, as an adult and a professional who's been doing it for many, many years?
Well, I think what it does is it brings us all together. It just like solidifies us that we can all relate to each other in how we work and what we're going through. We all, as artists, we all deal with some of the same struggles or issues. We just, it's a different subject matter or it's a different situation, but whether it's theater or music or, music for Bukka or whatever it is, or visual art, I think that understanding, number one, supporting each other, not competing against each other. It's like, I remember I had an issue with this when I was in art school, because the first semester I was in art school, my dad was on the cover of Art News. And it's like, everyone's like, dude, you're Terry Allen's son? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, what are you doing here? And I was like, well, I'm here what are you doing here? And it kind of gave me an issue, it kind of gave me like a momentary complex. And then I was like, you know what, I kind of got mad at myself for falling victim of that. But it was very short-lived. But I realized how much of an advantage and how much of a blessing it was to come from a family that is, to have creative parents. I mean, it's like any kid's dream, really, if you think about it, and loving parents, so, and then when you can actually work together and understand each other, it's just a huge additive in making us all closer, I think.
Yeah.
I think there's an evolution kind of that happens. It's like talking about the movies. When I was a kid, we would go to the movies constantly because that was our main source of entertainment. And after the movie, all of the kids that went to the movies would play the movie. We'd divvy up characters in the movie, and we would actually play the movie, And I think that spilled over into when our kids were little, and that idea of after the movie, you draw the movie, you play music, you talk about what's going on, and so there's a kind of a funny through line for me that goes through. Even when Bukka was talking about listening to the tape in the back bedroom, listen to those mixes. One of the things that's still crucial to me whenever I do record anything is to put it in motion. Get it, put it in a car and drive and listen to it while you're moving, because somehow that's the real test of the thing is kind of putting it in motion, and that's really what we were doing after a movie and talking to the kids about that. It's putting that movie into some kind of emotion that you're taking control of in a way. So it is an evolution, I think, and then for everybody to kind of diverge into the things that their necessities, their personal needs as an artist. It's amazing because there's such a backlog of trust that you have in intentions, what these people are doing. I might not like something, I might think something's weird, I might not relate to something, but I never doubt the intent, never doubt what's behind the necessity of doing it, whether it's songs or pictures or whatever. And that's pretty big, I think. The older I get, the bigger that feels.
Yeah.
Another thing, Paul, excuse me, we all keep notebooks, and we all have always played. We've always played with each other like kids. Yeah. I mean, when Terry and I were dating, he'd knock at the door and all he'd say is run. And we would just run for our lives all night long, not knowing who we were running from. We're still running from this son of a bitch. We have always, and the kids too, have appreciated that kind of playing. And so I think it gives you a chance to do something. And because there's that element to it, you're not so afraid that you're going to make a mistake or it's going to be bad. It's like this grand experiment, and you're playing and having, yeah, I mean, you're serious with your work, but you're still open to that kind of, let's try this, you know?
Yeah. And
I think being open to that. Oh, I was just going to say, I think that openness has a lot to do with the trust that my dad was talking about. And that's just over time, you know, it's like, it's funny, like playing with my dad, played a lot of gigs over the years and played with a lot of different musicians as well. And the thing that's kind of fascinating about it is that because of that trust and that time, there's nothing that's more comfortable or that I, in a sense, understand in terms of how to connect to it musically, because it's something that I know so well. So it's really natural feeling, you know, and I love that feeling. And I think that's the kind of energy that helps create really great music when people do feel comfortable, but not in any way using that comfort to slack, but to use it as leverage to create something really good. And, you know, I've been in situations where I'm working with musicians that are just fantastic, but there's a pressure that's coming down from whoever is creating the record at the time or whoever's the band leader at the time. And the lack of that kind of pressure in playing with my dad is what subsequently makes it really wonderful, I think, because there's like a generosity of exchange that's going on. It's really hard to explain.
It's a built-in
I didn't
chemistry.
really know what it was until I saw Bobby Bear and his kid, who's a great songwriter and player, play his show at the Continental here in Austin one night. And it was the first time where it leveled me. The show was like, I loved it. And I realized I loved it because it's the first time I ever recognized, I witnessed the connection that I had such a hard time explaining when I do play with my dad. But it's like, it's kind of like that weird thing with siblings singing harmonies, you know, it's like there's this weird kind of understanding. It's like I understand my dad's sense of rhythm. A lot of people don't understand it, but I do, and the musicians that work with him really do understand it. And it's like, and that's from just knowing one another without trying to really, I guess, you know.
You had mentioned to me, Bukka, that there's something really comforting and secure about when you're playing your dad's music, or when y'all were recording this last album, you know, to see his shoulders, see him at his piano. There's something that whenever you're performing in that space, you just know it's going to be all right, and you know that it's also going to be something that's special.
Yeah, I mean, and that gets more and more prevalent as I get older, you know. I think about it a little bit more now. And I've thought about how this last record was made, because it's like, I don't know of many artists that are generous enough to be as collaborative with how this record was put together as my dad. And the irony to that is that some of the musicians that I do know that I consider really, really generous, they're really good at what they do, and they're not worried about trying to prove themselves in any way. But the other thing that was incredible about the record is that generational thing where musicians that I grew up with were on the record, and some of my friends that I've grown up with are on the record as well. It's kind of like I was introduced to a group of people, and then my folks were introduced to people. And it's amazing how, like y'all can talk about that, mom and dad, about just friends of ours have become friends of theirs and vice versa. And it's like, it's pretty amazing. It's like, you know, I was talking about some really good friends of mine that I went to school with, that I still play music with, that I will be friends with my entire life, and those relationships. And that's another thing I want to talk about with the students at Texas Tech. It's like those relationships go on forever if you really connect with someone. And I have friends that have similar relations that my dad and mom have from when they were in college and in LA. And it's like the same kind of dynamic, but now we're all working together.
Well, and Bale, it's like half of the artists that y'all grew up that were our friends are dying to show in your gallery. It's just this.
Yeah. I mean, it's like
it's such a merging of a wonderful, blessed life that we've gotten to
it's
live.
Like Jim wrote.
It's been very fortunate. Yeah.
Jim told me when he had the show at Bale's, he's like, he was so excited to show at Bale's Gallery. And I've known Jim through my mom and dad since we were little kids. And he was almost like, it revitalized him. And it was like he was able to, and that was a great show. That was one of my favorite shows that you'd have. But it was talking to Jim about that, about just how everyone over time relies on each other in different ways. And it becomes a giant community of people that
it's like a family. It's a family. Just like you're talking about. That's the same way with old friends. And I mean, it's like there is that feeling that I didn't even need to worry about what certain people are going to bring to a gallery show. I have enough trust in them and what they've done over years of their career to just give them a green light and know that when they show up, it's going to be a beautiful show. And they hopefully, it's reciprocated both ways and they feel the same way to where they're like, okay, this is a tiny little gallery in Austin, but I'm going to do a show because they know what the intention is or whatever it is. But I think it's like a family feeling of trust,
And you know what? Some of those artists have shown all over the world. And they've said, this was my favorite show. I love this so much because of that, just that
bond. Yeah, the bond that you guys have built. And I've seen it firsthand working with you all over the last 6 or 7 years, just how not only it's this family here, but it's also that extended family that are just as comfortable and love each other just as much as y'all do, and have that sort of unspoken bond that just is made from the years of working together and relying on each other and growing together.
Another huge thing, Paul, is that my mom and dad, like over time, have really been like parents to a lot of my friends who didn't have anything, who had really screwed up situations, or, it's like they have given my friends the same kind of permission that they gave Bale and I to do what we do. And therefore the family, just over the course of time, there are a lot of people that we're all interconnected in a way, but there's a lot of my friends that kind of look up to my mom and dad as someone who just cares about them and what they're doing. And they get that attention, and it's sincere, that they weren't getting from anywhere else. And it's like, that's another thing that's really crucial to be able to have in your life, is the support or permission to be able to do something without it feeling like it's a constant battle or you're constantly getting ridiculed by it,
Yeah. Terry, you're going to say something, Terry.
No, I was just enjoying
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to say, we're painting this rosy picture, like everything's always great. Well, it's not always great. And, Terry and I would struggle when we're working together. He'd say, oh God, this is the worst day of my life, because you were just so wrong about that light and you just wouldn't give up on it. And so we have fought like hell through everything at the same time. But a good example is when Bukka and Bale were little, they got in a fist fight, and I was trying to break it up, and it was terrible. I mean, they just hated each other's guts. And I had to call Terry to come home, which was what I did a lot. And the whole house was just blowing to smithereens, And then I went in later, and at that time, they just slept on the floor on two little half beds. about this far apart. And I went in there and they were holding hands. And I said, what? I thought y'all hated each other. And they said, well, we do, but we always hold hands before we go to sleep.
That's funny.
That is
I,
awesome.
one of the things that was always a great mystery to me was because Joe Harvey and I are both only children, and so grew up in a room by yourself, and I was always just kind of dumbfounded at the idea of somebody growing up in the room with you.
Yeah.
Like how I couldn't. I just couldn't see how that worked. And I still don't particularly. All I know is that both of them had tennis shoes that stunk like the mouth of the devil.
That was one of my first gigs, Paul. Striping Converses and Vans for people. I always had a pile of some.
I would go in and just throw them in the yard,
We are so we're running short on time. So I want to just go around to each of you as sort of a final thing and just ask you to share, either an anecdote from a collaboration that you've all done together, or maybe even just a last thought on what it has meant to collaborate with your family and what's that like, and maybe some advice on that. So either or of those things, if you want to share an anecdote from a collaboration, or if you just want to maybe, kind of put a final exclamation point on the conversation and talk about what it means to collaborate and maybe some advice. Bale, let's start with you.
Well, for me, I think just growing up and being in this family has been, I think it's evident that anyone who is born into loving arms, into a caring family, has an advantage in life. And I think Buck and I are undoubtedly, we're born into loving arms. And then when the extra additive is the fact that our parents are both very creative, and they were able to balance that. And it really gave us, gave Buck and I role models and a way to live our life outside of creatively, just like in how to treat people, or at least, gave us some kind of, they cared about being good parents. And our family, we refer to ourselves as the Four Rocks. We'd always drive from Fresno to Lubbock and back for summer and Christmas. And we got out in the petrified forest, or the petrified desert in the Mojave Desert. And we were little kids, but I remember this. And we all got out and picked up a rock. And then we got back in the car, and each rock symbolized ourselves. And then we put them on the dash, and they were all together just in one pile, but they weren't touching. And so that idea has always, from that moment on, I think we're the Four Rocks, we're all individual, and the other three always support the individual. And as, all together, we're one strong family, but individually we have the confidence to do anything in the world, because we have that underlying just layer of support and love. And that means everything to me. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Who wants to follow that? That was fantastic, Bale. Terry, you want to go next?
I'll add one little thing. Terry and I have tornadoes on our hands, which will tell you something about us. But we also have four rocks right there, and they are separate, but they're very close.
Yeah, look, I've got this. And this bracelet, I don't know if you can see it, but see the four rocks right there on my fingertip?
I do see them.
I've had this, I think, since I was 13 on my wrist.
But look what I have, Paul. Look what I have in my ear. Paul, can you see that? All right, that's a skull from Venice Beach when I was in junior high, and I was with my brother and Bukka.
Yeah.
I hope you have the same ear in your head. Your earring.
I did.
Yeah. We lost you there for a second, Bale.
Oh, we broke up.
That Possum Kingdom internet's not as good as
What I wanted to kind of add on to what Bale said, it's like, when you kind of think about, I think about it a lot more now that I'm raising my own kids or my own kid, and there's a lot that I've thought about, it's like Bale and I always had each other. That was another huge thing being a kid. It's like, we had the support of my mom and dad, but Bale and I had each other all the time. So it was like, we could go off, we could always entertain ourselves. If they were off doing their thing, we could do, we relied on each other a lot. And crew,
we were out of town.
Especially if they were out of town. We had some, the way that we had parties kind of carried on until we were about 40 years old. So. But,
and then
I look at Crew, and Crew's an only child, and it bewilders me looking at him in his room by himself. Like, I never knew that. And I think about both y'all because he's by himself, and y'all are both only children. So it's interesting watching how he kind of relates to things. But what Bale was saying, I think, is the key. Like, the only thing that I really want to do with Crew is to make him feel secure enough to be able to go as far away from me as possible and live his life, and I think the only way you can really comfortably do that, you can always run away from stuff. I never felt like I was running away from anything. I always felt like I could run towards something and get very far away because I had something that I could fall back on. And that's what the whole kind of symbolize of the symbol of the four rocks is. It's like, we're all really close. And as hard as things can get, or as beautiful or as sad, we can always talk about it, and it may be real explosive or real joyful. It doesn't matter, but that honesty is what helps you move forward, I think. And anyway, I mean, it basically boils down to that, just trying to grow up with some sort of enough, we had enough security in the love of one another to be able to actually become ourselves and get the hell away from everything and discover what we wanted to do. And that's all I really want to do for my own son, is to have him know that I'm always here, but I want you to go. Like, go and live your life. And Bale and I always had that, and that just comes from the simple act of loving someone else.
Yeah.
I think that applies to every family on earth, every person on earth. It's like, if you have that kind of bond, it gives you the confidence to do what you want to do. And we just happen to be under kind of in this globe of musicians and artists and people who are really creative. So it just added to the adventure, you know?
Terry, closing thoughts, or is that good?
It's pretty good. I know that we got together and I recorded a song that I wrote for my dad called Red Leg Boy. And this was before Crew was born, and Sled was just an infant. And I wanted everybody on it. I wanted, it was about my dad. I wanted Buck and Bale on it, and grandson. So grandsons, sons, great, and father, So, and that, I would listen to it again the other night, and I really just treasure that idea, And I've been so lucky to have so many incredible adventures, with my family. We were growing up trying to, at the same time as we were raising them, we were kind of raising them. And also we were throwing ourselves into these invisible zones that we didn't know how we were going to come out of as artists or whatever, which is what artists do. So there's the whatever tensions and things that go with that. So, it was, the whole thing was, in thinking about it, was a very high energy kind of question marks flying everywhere. But at the same time, the thing that you went back to was the way you felt about your kids and your wife, for me.
Yeah. That's
That's
awesome.
that's where the root of everything that was worth it came
Yeah.
from. You know?
Can I just read in one of my plays an example? It was the last play that was just my play, but had everybody was always included with stuff, and I wanted to tell you some song lyrics from everybody that were in it. Yeah, Bukka's song says, "There's a million miles of highway stretched across his face, with a million more to conquer and a million more to trace. Every line of sorrow is a sign from the winds of fate. Every crack of beauty is a map from a magic place." And then there's a section in the play where I say, and I can just hear Bale singing his song. And here are a few of the lyrics from Bale's song. "And there's an angel on my dashboard. And then on the opposite page, I wrote faith. Some dice on my rear view mirror, and I wrote luck. My doors are lined with red velvet, blessings. And on the ceiling is a chandelier, God." And then I said, and then everybody sings aloud Terry's lyrics. "You've got to open your heart to some better things. Got to open your soul like a door. Let your heart roll out and let it ramble about with the ones that you love, for sure."
That is fantastic. What a way to end it. Bale,
That, by the way, is all a description of a lowrider.
I know Bale's song when you hear the whole thing, but I just stole some of his lines,
Makes
which
it
is
all
what I'm
more
good at.
sacred.
Bull Rocks, the Allen family, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your evening. All right, and here we are. Allen family, how are you tonight?
Good.
Good. How are you?
Doing good, doing well. So we just heard our conversation, and we appreciate all of you who have showed up and joined us. We obviously pre-recorded that, and that's so we could add some substance and texture with those pictures and videos. So appreciate you sticking around for the Q&A.
Yeah, who were those people?
Yes. I like we did get our color palette matched, so good job everybody on that. Ingrid in Marfa has a question for y'all. She asked, this is in context to the movie section, what is the Allen family favorite movie, or what are your favorite movies, so that we can watch them and know them?
I kind of prefer the Exorcist and Jaws. You know.
Unfortunately, I watched The Exorcist by myself when I was pretty young.
Well,
So,
I'm more of an Evil Dead 2 person.
Yeah, Harvey and I had gone to see Jaws, and so I decided the next day I would take him. And there's one scene where that head kind of falls into the porthole that scared everybody in the theater, you know. And so I was sitting, Buck and Bale on each side of me, and I told him, I said, okay, this is really going to be scary. This next scene is going to really be scary. And so Buck just jumps up and runs out of the theater, you know. And so I jump up and run after him, and I, get him out there, and we hear this massive scream in the audience, from that scene. And then I came back, and Bale was just sitting there. I thought, oh shit, I forgot Bale, and he was sitting there just like rigid with his hair sticking up, and he just said, "That's the scariest thing I ever saw in my life."
I never sat on the toilet for over a year after Jaws came out. It was literally that was it, man. I don't think anyone in the nation did.
Joe Harvey, what about you? What's your favorite movie?
Oh, I love all movies. I don't think I've ever walked out of a single movie in my life. I love the movies. But I think To Kill a Mockingbird and Giant are probably my all-time favorites. I can't tell you how many times I've watched Giant as many times as Terry watched Guns of Navarone.
Well, there you go. That's
Yeah,
perfect.
but I had to watch it because I was an usher in the theater that was showing it. It wasn't by choice.
Well, those are perfect choices for Ingrid and Chris down in Marfa to watch Giant. They live amongst it, so that's kind of
Yeah,
a perfect choice there.
absolutely.
Terry, I want to ask you about your latest album, just like Moby Dick, that came out recently. I know that was, we're talking about collaboration and family collaboration, but also that extended family, the extended Allen family. I know that this album was really special to you, and the process of recording it was very special for you. Would you talk a little bit about what that meant and why you brought so many people in to be a part of that recording process, including Bukka and family?
Well, it just seemed like a natural thing. We had a big anniversary party, our 55th, I think, anniversary party in Marfa. And it was the second time we'd been to Marfa. We, just invited everybody who wanted to come. We'd send out all of these invitations that just said, come to Marfa certain days, bring your own money. And that was it. And there was no real agenda other than we played this big gig at the St. George Hall there. And but Tim, we all had a great time and whatever. And then later that year, Joe Harvey and I were having supper with Tim Crowley in Houston, who has the St. George and theater there, and he said, well, we have to do this every year, Joe Harvey and I looked at each other like, he had just lost his mind, because doing it every year was just inconceivable to us. We've done about 4 of them and 5 of them, and they just kind of spontaneous how they happen. But I said, well, can we maybe we can come and get some musicians and just come and play or write songs or whatever. And so he gave us like the equivalent of 50 rooms and the theater, and said, come and do anything that you want to do. So, I called up Richard and Bukka and Charlie, and I hadn't really worked with Charlie before. I called Dave Alvin and just said, just come, we're going to Marfa this time, just come and let's write some music. And I just met Shannon through Bukka. And so we all kind of converged on the town, and I brought some songs that I've been working on, but everybody brought things, and we started writing, and we wrote about 4 or 5 songs that we used or collaborated on the record. And I'd never worked that way before, but it was like this very fertile kind of period. And so we came back in the following December and did the same thing, but we worked up the songs. We had a gig coming up at the Paramount in Austin, and so we kind of worked up the songs into like a group of songs, like one thing, and performed it in Marfa, just gave just a surprise concert kind of for the town, and just to see what it'd be like in front of people, and I felt really good about that. And so it for me, it just kind of grew. It took on this kind of evolution. Everybody contributed this, their incredible abilities to it. And Dave Allen came in just for one day at the end in July when we did that, and we sat down and wrote. God, what did we write?
The Last Stripper.
The Last Stripper. Death of the Last Stripper. And that's funny how that happened. because Bukka was playing this like beautiful melody, and I just popped into my head the death of the last stripper. And I said, God, that's what it reminded. And Dave said, write that down. And so wrote it, and we started just kind of messing with it, you know. And then Joe Harvey threw in some lyrics to it, and it just it built. And also I know the first night that we were there, Joe Ely was there, Joe and Sharon, and Joe and I sat in the theater for 2 nights, just playing songs for each other, which we had never done. You know, we've known each other for years, but we've never just kicked back and played songs for each other. The next night, Charlie came, joined us, and we wrote Fare Thee Well. And that was kind of how it happened, you know.
Yeah.
So then we did it at the Paramount. I wanted to do all new songs the first set, and so we did. We went and did it, and it, you know, felt great about that. And then we tried to book studio time to record it, and that's where it came about. Bukka probably has other angles from that story too. You know?
Yeah, and Buck, I know you talked about that. You talked about playing with your dad and understanding that rhythm, but then also the recording of this album you and I have talked about as well, and what that process meant to you and what you saw in that.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty spot on what my dad was saying. But you know, one thing that I think helped it was you know, no one knew what to expect, and no one really knew. Everyone was excited about going and trying it, but I don't think any of us expected to walk out with that many beautiful songs, you know. Yeah. And there was just it was nice too because it was kind of staggered, you know, in the sense that like Ely and my dad were together, then Charlie came in, then Shannon and I came in, and then Dave came in, and Joe left. So it was never too crowded in the space. We were always able to continue a flow without kind of separating into these different groups, you know.
Yeah, and Richard was there. And
yeah, Richard was there playing. The thing that just as far as making records that was just fantastic and such a rarity is the ability to be able to work the songs. Like everyone worked those songs until they got to a place to be able to be performed. So we actually went into like these months of pre-production in a sense. It's like we worked and worked and worked stuff out and edited and finished stuff. And then by the time we went into the studio, it was like butter. It was quick, and the songs were ready to go, and they had been worked out, you know, which is a different way of making a record, to be able to put that much time prior to actually recording.
Well, yeah, it was totally different for me because the way I would come into the studio with songs, and I would sit down at the piano, and everybody would kind of come by the piano, and I would just sing the song. Then people would go to their instruments. I would sing it again. People would just start. So it would build that way. That's how. But in this case, all of that had been done by the time we went into the studio. So it was just that joy of making a record, you know, with knowing what we were doing.
Yeah, and I think everyone I know I did. I know when Shannon and I came in, there were just some ideas. Like I have a tendency to just record ideas. Whenever something strikes me in the moment, I literally have hundreds of ideas that are on my iPhone, and I download them and I go back to them. Sometimes I finish them right there on the spot, but there were a handful of ideas that I was messing with. And Shannon had been singing some melodies, and, you know, she had started singing some melodies over it, and then it started evolving. And then there were some melodies that Shannon had that were just melodies. And then we started writing something to support those. So there was a lot of different ways that we kind of approach these songs, like Harmony 2 that's on the record. That lyric, Shannon just started kind of humming this beautiful melody, and then Charlie started strumming these kind of beautiful chords, and it slowly evolved out.
And that's all Joe Harvey's lyrics.
Harvey, they were all my mom's lyrics.
Joe Harvey kind of hummed the tune to him, and everybody it started to build that way, and it's this fantastic song.
Yeah,
we get back.
It was unique.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Harvey.
Oh, it was a really wonderful experience for me because I'd written songs for years and I just walked in with a big box full. But and I don't play an instrument, so I just sung my song, and everybody just started playing under it and adding to it and and singing it, and it was so great for me for all of them to start building this song like that. It was just really a gift. It was great.
That's awesome. So next question comes from Caitlin Grand, and Bale, let's start with you. How has the pandemic affected y'all's work and how you go about your creative process?
Well, for me, I make art probably first and foremost, and in that regard, it hasn't really changed my daily. I always say that artists are kind of conditioned for this kind of thing because that's how we live our lives almost to a certain degree. Like we're in terms of monetary or the roller coaster or that type of thing. But our day to day, in terms of being a visual artist, I've been able to go to my studio and come home so that the daily routine hasn't changed. But as far as being a gallerist, I have a little gallery attached to my studio, and it basically just shut down. I mean, if I was doing 100% sales, it went down to 10%. It was basically obsolete, and I canceled shows. And the way I did it was I had a schedule that was already preset, and I just started canceling one at a time instead of pushing the calendar. So I just kind of put them on the tail end of it. And so I canceled 3 shows, and now I've done 2. I have a show up now, artist named June Kaneko, and the way we did it is we had masks. I hired extra people to make sure that people were social distancing. I kept it to a minimum of 5 people. We did temperature checks. I provided masks as well. We had sanitizers everywhere, and I did it on an off night and not with the support of any other galleries. So I deliberately made it feel comfortable. And it was actually refreshing. The first time I did it, it was kind of depressing, because we maybe had 40 people over the course of, instead of 1,000 people or 400 or whatever, we had 40. And then, so it's definitely affected things in a tremendous way. And one of the things you try to do is find out as an artist where your kind of collector base is, or as a gallerist. And those things are always shifting. It's like the oil guys are gone when the barrel's bad, and the financial guys are gone when the market's bad. And so it's like, what's happening right now is that tech is doing really well, and you notice all the construction and everything, and people online ordering, so tech's really well, and it's always a challenge, but that's kind of always been, so.
Yeah. Joe Harvey, what about you? What's this time been like for you, the last 8-9 months?
Well, there's that sadness of knowing that the whole world is in a desperate situation with COVID. And I think because of our age and our health issues or whatever, we feel like we are pretty compromised. So we have really taken this seriously. We haven't gone out at all since March. And because we've always been so social, and it's good and bad. We like it. We're going so much that the last few years that we were having trouble staying at home because the calendar was full. And Terry's working on a project that he really needed to be in his studio. I'm trying to finish a book, and I really need to be in my studio. And then we took on some other projects as well. And so, it's a gift to be able to be home. I think mainly, rather than bitching all the time over not being able to go out and not seeing our friends and being social and everything, I think we more than that feel blessed. Uh, we see our kids and family on Zoom, and that's actually better than wearing a mask because everywhere, if we poke our head outside, of course, we have on our mask. And so, anyway, we've been very blessed to be at home and be able to work, and the time has been really good.
Bucka, what about for you? I know you've taken on some projects, have gotten into the studio during this time. Can you talk about what the last 8 or 9 months has meant for you and what you've done?
Yeah, I think I just had to kind of readjust and focus on a few different things, mainly to get through this financially. Um, there have been moments of panic. There have been moments of peacefulness, in the sense that when I am able to embrace the fact that I'm able to actually spend a lot of time with my boy, I'm home. I can embrace it. It's wonderful. It's funny. It's like I think everyone's going through this. It's like I have these days where I'll look around it within my own bubble, my own universe, and I feel like my mom. I feel very blessed, and and I really like it. And then there are other days where I look at the walls and I'm like, if I don't get out of here pretty soon, I'm going to go absolutely out of my mind. So the emotions just sway a lot. But as far as work, I've been really lucky. I've been able to do a lot of sessions. I've kind of continually done sessions throughout COVID. I've worked on a handful of records, which I feel very lucky to be able to do. Most of my friends and most musicians at this, especially the way that the industry works, most people are out. They have to tour to make a living, so a lot of people are really suffering. And I'm constantly in touch with a lot of my friends. That's another thing that I think has become very prevalent during this time, is how important it is to stay connected with the people you care about and to be open to new connections when possible. I'm also adjunct teaching here in town, and the teaching has been really interesting. And what I've kind of really focused on early on was trying to get everything. I mean, right now, everything has obviously had to go online, but what I'm trying to do is actually have it continue into once it's a COVID-free world, because it would enable me even more freedom into where I would be able to teach and do what I'm doing, no matter where I am. So I've put a lot of focus and energy on trying to develop these online platforms so that I can teach my classes. And also, I really encourage my students to be able to there's a lot of online platforms where these kids can meet up with one another and talk about what we've discussed in class. And I try to really encourage um, a continuation of communicating and connecting. It's very hard to connect right now because of what's going on, but there are some amazing tools. This is an amazing tool, what we're doing right now. I mean, it's like we are able to connect in a sense, and hopefully, you know, get your point across or take something in. I've been inspired many, many times seeing stuff online or having conversations online with people that have spawned into some individual work. As far as live playing, I'm starting to sense that people are trying to do it, but it's a little difficult. I just did an Austin City Limits taping with Ray Wiley Hubbard about a week and a half, a couple weeks ago, and it was so nice to play live. It was just fantastic to just be in a room playing live, and we were all masked up and all that kind of stuff. And then we went and did the taping after we rehearsed, and there's like this weird pressure, this weird energy that's just pushing down on everything that kind of gets in the way of everything. I mean, it's like we were at the Moody Theater. There were 40 people in there with masks, a little bit too many people to feel super comfortable, and everyone's just on edge a little bit. So you could feel that. You can feel that in the performance, but also everyone was just dying to play. So I don't want to rush back into it too soon, but I think it will come back. And I think in the meantime, all we can do is really seek to make connections with people that we want to make connections with, and seek and be curious about the things that you're interested in. you know it's a
Absolutely.
good opportunity to work if you're
Yes.
into doing something that you enjoy. it's an amazing opportunity to work because you have the time. Because when it's gone, you're going to wish you had this kind of time at some point. You know?
Absolutely. Terry, what about for you?
I've always tried to go to my studio every day when I was in town and work. So, coming in here is it's a normal, natural thing to me. I know when the virus first hit, it was kind of like 9/11 for me. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't I just couldn't really focus on what I was doing. But then when we were in Austin then, and we came back to Santa Fe, and as far as work and as far as being in a place to work that I'd love to be, all of that's working really. I just miss the sensual act of going to cafes and going to bookstores and going to bars and meeting people in these places that are just have been always habits of life, and now they're kind of on hold. And so I do miss that. I just miss all of the textures of your life, and miss friends. But we've been doing a Zoom a week with like Joe and Sharon Ely and Tamara Saviano and some people that we really care about, and that's helped. For me, it's been really nice just to cuss the elections and be happy about the end results, and but just cuss politics in general. And talk about books, talk about music, talk about just life. And I think it's kind of like life has been tethered, put on hold for a little bit, at least life as we know it. And so I'm ready to get out and raise hell a little bit. And
Yeah.
here raising.
Paul, can I add to that real quick? Because we're also, individually we're working on our own things, but I think inevitably what happens in times like these is artists, sooner or later, these emotions brew and bubble and things come up to the surface, and it comes across in your work somehow. But simultaneously, while doing our own projects or whatnot, I've been involved in certain shows that like mass sculpture shows or benefit shows, and I'm curating a racism show. Just all these timely things. My mom and dad started they're raising, you can tell them about that, but I think it's things that are related to what's going on in the world right now. Yeah. I think a lot of artists are really focusing on that too as subject matter, a little bit more than normal.
Absolutely. One of my favorite, you said you miss cafes, Terry. One of my favorite cafe stories with you is we went and got lunch at the Taco Foundation, and they were playing your music on the on the sound system there. So
no, how could anybody eat to that?
Yeah, I remember I got up and asked him to turn it off. The next question comes from Todd Wolfson. He says, "Who tells the biggest big fish stories of the bunch?"
Bukka.
Bukka, we all know.
Bukka.
It's Bukka? I would have guessed Terry. It's Bukka.
I think.
Well, Bukka and Joe Harvey.
Bukka.
I think my mom is the queen of it.
My mom's the lying woman, so there you go.
That definitely ends the.
Todd's only got one eye, so he asks a lopsided question.
I think Todd's probably the worst.
That's great. Terry, this one's specific to you. It comes from John Poach. He says, "In The Beautiful Waitress you wrote, she asked me if I made any money. I said, no, I have to teach to do that. Obviously, you ended up making money from your art, so you didn't have to teach. But can you talk about what you got out of teaching when you did it? What's the best about teaching? What's the worst?"
Well, I always regarded teaching as kind of falling into a hole with some money at the bottom, and I never had intended to teach. I love the energy of being around people trying to make things. I love that thing of being around students. I'd have no sense of art belonging in a institutional situation, because I don't think it's an institutional act. I think it's almost an anti-institutional act. So there's a contradiction that you're kind of living with if you're an artist and you're working in that situation. For me, there was. And I learned early on that it was very easy to, that as an artist, you never have any guarantees and what's going to happen, if you're going to sell something, anything's going to happen with the work. And when you're teaching, you can go up and talk about what you're doing in your studio and make a big check. And I think that pulls the rug out of under a lot of people that are teaching, because they just simply say, why should I kill myself in my studio with no guarantee when I can go up here and just talk about it and get a check? And so I think that's a real danger zone. But at the same time, for students, it's one of the few times in your life you're going to have access to space, to materials, to friends, at least for a long time. Because once you get out of school, you have to rebuild all of that yourself. So you need to take advantage of it, I think. And school for me was a incredible, great experience. One of the great ones that turned my whole life around. But as far as being in the school, it's really a duality, I think. And I'm sure that leaks over into students. But to be a teacher, I think it's difficult. It was for me.
Yeah.
And I know that is not true for a lot of people. A lot of people really dig in and do that really wonderfully, and can handle that.
What's it been like? This is a question from me to y'all about the grandkids and about Bale and Bukka's sons. But what's it been like? You guys have a new generation of Allens, and art. Bale's an artist, Bukka's a musician, but Bale, I know your boys play basketball, go fishing, entrepreneurship. What's it been like, Joe, Harvey, and Terry? Let's start with y'all, and then I'll talk to the proud dads. But what's it been like to see your grandkids go out and find what they're passionate about?
I'm telling you, it's so joyous. It is so wonderful. They are doing so many things, and they're doing great things. They're really accomplishing a lot. They were just here. Not Crew hasn't been here, but since COVID. But Sled and Calder came and spent the night and sat outside in their mask. Didn't come in the house. Stayed in the guest house. Anyway, they sat out there and they played new songs that they had written. Crew got on the piano, and it was fabulous. It blows your head off, his music. And the songs were so good, and it was so much fun. And then everything they're doing, it's just great. It's just fantastic. So we are going to make an album, our family, called The Blood-Sucking Maniac.
I didn't know that was the title yet.
That's what
You heard it here first, folks. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Tammy, what about for you to see your grandkids?
What about what?
What about for you to see the boys go out and follow their passions?
Oh, it's the best. Just to you get caught up in that thing of kind of, in a weird way, the same thing I did with Buck and Bale, is that you kind of relive your own memories when you watch these lives starting to take place and doing these things that I'm sure Buck and Bale feel the same way watching them, but it makes you feel still like you're a part of the human race, that you're not going to just take off and fly to another planet or something. It grounds you. in a way that's really nice.
Yeah. Bale, for you, what's it like to have your sons, obviously next generation, the way you were raised and sort of trying to mold them in that, not mold them in the same way, but seeing them, giving them wings and letting them fly.
Well, it's incredible. And first of all, I got to say, today is my youngest boy's 18th birthday.
Happy
So happy
birthday,
birthday, Calder.
Birthday,
So yeah, I have two boys. I have Sled, who's 26, and Calder, who's now 18, and they're incredible. They're, in a lot of ways, I see a little of me in them, and I see a little of their mom in them. And then the revelation I had when they were really young, and it was just kind of like to celebrate their own individual existence and get myself out of the way and support where they're going, even if it was something like hunting or something that I didn't do or wasn't interested in. I remind myself I was born in Fresno, California, or raised in Fresno, and they're raised in Austin, Texas, on ranches and totally different environment, and but they're both anglers, and they love to fly fish, love the outdoors. And that's been incredible because they can get lost without cell phone service or any of this other stuff that they're absorbed with most of the time when they're in town.
Yeah.
Oh, we lost you. Not there.
Are you
Bucka,
there, Bill?
Bucka, yeah. How about you? I know Crew's a little bit younger, but what do you see blossoming in him?
Well, right this very second, he's in his room editing tutorials on his new mouse that my mom and dad just sent him for a gift. And he's doing this little crew review, and it's on, he's got his YouTube channel, and he's putting together little movies, and he's kind of heavily into that. He's a great piano player. He sits and plays the piano all the time. I just try to get him, I just let him be involved whenever he wants to be, and just kind of watch what he gravitates towards is really remarkable. But he's, he'll kind of sneak around and come and play the piano for a little while, and then he'll go into his room and work on his videos and game. It's amazing. He's on, like all of us, all of his schools on a platform called Schoology. It's all virtual learning, but it's like I literally go in and watch him working. One thing that's remarkable is just watching how kind of intuitive and ingrained technology is with his generation. I mean, he's little, he's 11, but it's like he runs circles around me in terms of the technology, So he's accessing that like crazy, and he's finding like all the paths that are creative that run through technology. That's what he's starting to tap into, It's like he's into animation, he's into soundtracks and animation and all that kind of stuff. But more than anything, it's just great watching him kind of discover things.
I think
He's made today to be my Google. I can just call Crew and say, Crew, my phone is doing this. What do I need to do? And he goes, oh, Mammy, just listen to me.
Yeah, he does that to me too. It's like,
we are Mammy and Papa Rat.
Yes.
I think that's where the virus becomes the most apparent to me when I think about Crew and how it's affecting his life, and how he's having to learn, and how very different just it was from last year for him, and the same with Calder and Sled, just that shutdown effect that it's had, and how they're having to deal with it. I think it's much harder, it seems like, for younger people to deal with it, or not deal with it. They just have more obstacles than old people. It's like I told you the other day, Joe Harvey and I've been outside, and so it's not that hard on us, even though it cuts into those habits that you love and whatever. But for a kid, I think, when they need to socialize so desperately and have it, inhibited.
Yeah, that's really challenging. That's another thing that just trying to navigate at being a parent and trying to help your kid navigate through this. Because What's really strange about COVID is I don't think any of us know what the actual effects are going to be yet on just not being
Long-term
able
health.
to connect with other humans for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, I got on my way crew after school and stuff. He has a handful of friends that he's running around with and everything, and he seems to be emotionally okay right now. But I do know that it can get really hard on kids. But one thing that I also know is that a lot of this technology that's being developed, and I'm kind of like keeping an eye on what he's working on in different platforms, but a lot of this stuff is going to stick once COVID lets up.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Definitely.
I think a lot of the tech is going to become a new way of communicating that's going to ease up certain things for certain people.
Absolutely. Bale, we lost you there for a minute.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Which I know Calder's basketball, I mean, you're talking about challenges, right? Big time basketball player, and has sort of lost that this season.
Well, yeah, his summer basketball was canceled,
That's right.
and then he kind of had a knee surgery, so he missed his junior year. So it kind of changed his kind of trajectory of what he was visualizing doing. And then he started talking about taking a gap year, and all his friends are like, even if I go to college, maybe we'll just take a gap year, which might be great anyway. But it's like they're major changes. But what I was going to say, and I'll cap it, but about them singing songs, it's really incredible to hear them, for them to be able to express themselves through music and through art. I think it's such an incredible thing. And that's why I think like art in schools and music programs, I think they should be top priority in every school in this country, period. And, we were talking about like, what do you want to stand for at some point if you had all the time and money, and that might be one of them about, just making sure that that's really an option for all kids in school.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going to be our last question. It comes from Laura Webb, and it says, right now there's a lot of focus on self-care for mental health. As a creative family or as creative individuals, what are some of the things you're doing to recharge and refocus and make sure that you're staying on top of that of your mental health and of being able to focus during these challenging times with everything going on with COVID, with it being a political year, an election year, all of those things? How do you stay focused? How do you recharge? How do you take care of yourself?
Well, we go on a drive every Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen to music really loud, drive fast, listen to music loud, drive around, look at people, and then come back and go to work, which is what we normally do anyway. So
Terry has always been the DJ, and half of our life we sat on the floor listening to one new album after another. And now we're doing it again. It's so great. When the weather was good, after dinner, we would always go outside and just sit and have a glass of wine, and Terry would play one song after another. Sometimes we'd even dance. It was like the old days of just taking some time. But you know what? I say it's like, I feel like you're good and you wake up and then you just fall in a hellhole every once in a while. And you've got to get out of it. And I think the best way is to just really honestly just count your blessings and try to stay busy. And you're so fortunate there are things that you want to do that keep you busy. And the other thing we've tried to do is have as many Zooms with our family as we can and with our friends, and just stay connected and just be busy. Terry and I are trying to help with a group of people. We're all working together to do New Mexico's extremely poor. There's only Mississippi and New Mexico, poorest states in the country. 1 in 3 kids are hungry, and 1 in 5 adults in this state, which is shocking. But it's just getting worse with COVID. And so we've called a bunch of musician friends who are all just great, and not one person has said no. So we're having a Food for Love concert Valentine's Eve. So anyone that's watching, tune in for that. So we're raising money, and a friend is paying for all the expenses so that every dollar we raise goes to food. And so we're very excited about that.
Awesome.
But just keeping busy, you know.
Bale, for you?
Well, I mean, what the first thing I did is I went out and got a COVID puppy. So if you want to be busy, just get a COVID puppy. It'll drive you crazy, run you wild. You won't have time for much other than
Right.
that.
Adopt from
Yes.
your local
I
shelter.
I suggest that if you really want something to do. But no, I think one of the things we do and we try to do, my wife, Allison, and myself, we try to look at our refrigerator, and we've gotten in a pretty good habit of not throwing away food. And I drive to my studio all the time, and I go past homeless. There's 3,000 plus homeless people in Austin, and it's evident because it's gotten worse. And our local mayor is real compassionate about the situation, but it's a real problem, and no one's found a solution yet. But you realize when you go to these people, and it's real tricky with COVID. It's like I'll literally talk to them and wear 2 masks and come up and just hand the food and get back in my car. But there's something about that giving back, about that thing that just makes you feel like you're helping someone. And it's real simple to do, because you realize by the time you're leaving, the food you gave them, no matter what it is, they're eating it, like in some cases ravenously. So we empty the fridge every third day or something, and on my way to my studio, I hand it out. And I think that's just little things like that when so many people are hurting right now. Yeah. And so many people are just in dire straits. So, we're all blessed and fortunate. So that feels the best for me, to try to make someone feel better.
Yeah. Bukka, what about for you?
Yeah, I think Bale, I think one of the best ways you can kind of help yourself is to help others if you have a chance. I mean, the hardest part about this, it's like we're so used to this world of instant gratification, and it's kind of gone right now, so we're all kind of on this delayed gratification to a certain degree. And if you can get in your mindset and slow everything down, that's what I try to do. I try to slow things down and just embrace what's in front of me. I try to stay busy, but more than anything, in terms of whenever I'm down, or I reach out if I'm down about something. I reach out to people and friends of mine that I just am close to. And I'm also available and try to reach out when I am feeling well, because I know so many people. I don't think there's a person that's gone through this that hasn't had a moment of feeling really isolated and just down, if not depressed about it. And I have a lot of friends, who are really struggling right now. So I try to connect and stay open to them. It's amazing how just a simple conversation can get you through the day or help someone else get through the day. And if there's opportunities, I've been involved with quite a few benefits and stuff like that, where I'd be happy to donate my time to any kind of need that might be available. But for me, it's about connecting. It's like I know personally, sometimes if I get depressed about something, I have a tendency to isolate. And what I found during COVID is that it's very important to reach out when you start feeling that way, because everyone can relate to it.
Yeah.
So that's what I try to do. I mean, I try to exercise a little bit. I try to keep my blood flowing. I find that helps. Simple stuff. Try to meditate, whatever that, when I say that, I mean, just sit still and think about something positive and try to manifest it.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to see into the future with COVID. That's another thing that's really difficult for a lot of my friends. It's like they can't see a way out yet, and there's not a way out, and financially or with what they do, until I'm talking about people that are playing music all the time, just about most of my friends are musicians, and they're traveling on the road, and they cannot do that right now. And it's amazing to see how you can see it. Some of my friends, you can see the cracks when they start to come. It's very, very difficult. But I think that, you know, through communication and through connecting, it's very clear and as to how that can help people and help yourself. If you're really down, just reach out, because people are all on the same boat right now.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. Well, Allen family, thank you so much. Everybody who's watching, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Remember, this is only night one of the rest of the week. We're going to be spending it with the Allens in residency with Texas Tech University Outreach and Engagement and Texas Tech Public Media. Tomorrow night, it's Joe Harvey. We're going to be talking about craft and character, theater and film, and having to live with these yahoos. So make sure you stay tuned. And then Wednesday, we'll be back with Bale, Thursday with Bukka, and then finally Friday with Terry. So go to the website for more information and stick with the schedule. It'll be the same night. That same link that you used to come tonight, you'll use it again tomorrow night. And we'll see you back again tomorrow night with Joe Harvey in conversation. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks, Paul. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for putting up with this crazy family. Listen to all of that. Oh, my God. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Sweet dreams, everybody.